And welcome back. Former presidential hopeful John Edwards paid a visit to the Garden State, urging lawmakers to raise the state's minimum wage. Now, this is all an effort to lift thousands of working poor out of poverty. But critics say increasing the wage may do more harm than good, especially during rough economic times. Brenda Flanagan has more.
Groceries cost more, so do rent and utilities. In fact, New Jersey's the fourth most expensive state to live in. Now try doing it on a minimum wage of $7.15 an hour. You get creative.
I wait until I get a shut-off notice, and then I pay the utility bill, but then that takes from the rent.
Angel makes minimum wage, but can't make ends meet. Leanne waits tables at the Bridgewater Diner, but in this economy,
nobody wants to come out to eat, and if they do, nobody wants to leave a decent tip anymore.
For 3 days' work, Leanne took home $137 in tips and $20 in salary, and she's got 2 girls. But today, low-wage earners in New Jersey made a powerful friend, former presidential candidate Senator John Edwards.
I will be their voice, and I will fight for them.
He's on a mission to fight poverty nationwide, and today joined a Jersey campaign for higher wages.
That's why we call for a wage of at least $8.50 an hour, automatic increases every year, and protection for people whose livelihood relies on tips.
But some economists say businesses can't afford it.
Now, if all of a sudden they have to pay their labor even more, well, you know, what are they going to have to do? They have no choice but to push that on or fire people.
Edwards claims paying workers a living wage would strengthen the economy. Leanne hopes he's right.
And maybe I'd be able to bring my daughters out to McDonald's for a treat once in a while.
In Newark, Brenda Flanagan, My 9 News.
Joining me right now is John Schur. He is president of New Jersey Policy Perspective, whose organization is among the leaders of the Raise the Wage campaign in the Garden State. Also joining us is Paul Tayala, who is vice president of Government Affairs for Commerce and Industry, the Commerce and Industry Association of New Jersey. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. So why shouldn't we raise the minimum wage? It makes perfect sense.
Well, the segment that was shown earlier was about lifting people out of poverty, but increasing the minimum wage doesn't do that. You know, if an employee generates $7 an hour worth of revenue to a company, but government comes in and says you have to pay that person $8.50 an hour, the only choices are to raise costs on all consumers or to let that person go. And so that's been the traditional response to business. It doesn't necessarily lift people from poverty. It forces the lowest rungs of workers into unemployment.
Okay, but doesn't a worker have the right to I mean, we saw some stories here. We just saw this one woman not being able to take her kids out to dinner. That, you know, a big treat is going down to McDonald's. I mean, they're not making enough money.
Yeah, we're not here to try to prevent people from being pulled out of poverty, but the best way out is to get a job, to attain a skill and refine it, and to move yourself up the career ladder. You know, if you really believed you could increase the minimum wage without a negative impact on folks, then why not raise it to $25 an hour or $100? I think we would agree that $100 an hour, companies wouldn't be able to afford to hire people, and they'd have to let folks go. The same rule applies in this case of a raise to $8.50.
Okay, John, what's wrong with that?
Well, actually, if minimum wage had kept pace with CEO pay increases over the last 10, 20 years, it would be $25 an hour. It's economic stimulus. Really, you know, I'm not an economist, so maybe I'm missing something, but I don't get it when somebody says, if you pay people enough to live, that's bad for the economy. Right. This is good for the economy.
But
They'll
I mean,
be able
you
to spend
understand
the money.
the argument. If I'm,
sure.
if I'm a small businessman and I have 3 people working in the back,
yep,
and I'm paying them $7 an hour, round figures, and now suddenly I have to pay them $8, maybe one of them is going to be part-time.
Well, but it doesn't work that way. The studies have really shown over the years that
or I have to raise my
well,
prices.
The costs get absorbed by lower training costs, lower absentee, and yes, prices raised, but throughout the whole economy, so it's negligible for individual people. It makes sense to do it that way. Sure, we need to train people, and nobody could be against that. But the point is, if you're a waitress, or you're a janitor, or a retail clerk, we'll always need those people in this economy. They should be paid enough to live, to support a family and build a future.
Without a doubt. But I go into the sandwich shop that's employing these 3 people. I'm playing devil's advocate here. But I go into the sandwich shop and say, now you want to charge me $7.95 for a sandwich instead of $5.95, and there's this caveat there saying, oh, yeah, the reason for that is minimum wage went up.
Generally speaking, consumers have been willing to pay a few cents more for a product if it means people can live. And again, this is good for the economy because if you make something or sell sandwiches, don't you want people to make enough money to buy them? So in the end, it's good for the economy. The purchasing power of the minimum wage has just been going steadily down, even since the last increase in 2006. Since it peaked in 1968, it's gone down to where if it had kept up with inflation, it'd be $9.50 an hour today. We're only asking for $8.50.
Sounds reasonable.
The composite of a minimum wage worker in this state, in this country, is somebody who didn't have a job the year prior. They're typically between the ages of 16 and 24 years old. They're part-time, and they live in a household with an average income of $49,000 a year. That's not the composite of the people that we saw earlier that were the single working moms. It's more the profile of somebody just getting into the workforce. And if you increase the minimum wage, you're just going to deny their ability to get in the first place, and they'll never be able to pull themselves out of poverty.
So you're saying that if the minimum wage goes up, the demo that you just outlined right there is going to be unemployed. They're not even going to be employable because, what, they don't have skill? They don't want to work? Well,
not that they don't want to work. It's that their minimum wage jobs tend to be entry-level, quote-unquote, unskilled positions. So they can only generate so much worth of revenue for a company. They tend to be people getting in there for the first time. You know, and even worse, it's a sliding scale, and it impacts the poorest and most challenged in our society the most. Every 10% increase in the minimum wage decreases the proportion, the odds that you'll have a job by 8.5% if you're without a high school diploma. This is the exact wrong way to get us out of the economic state that the state of New Jersey is in right now.
How do they come up with that figure?
We could dual statistics all
I'm
day.
sure I have
in fact,
But I mean, here's I guess the biggest argument that I would have for you playing devil's advocate again is, don't people have a right to make a decent amount of money if they're, like, you know, cranking out widgets, or you name the job, whatever. I mean, you're calling them entry-level jobs, or whatever. Don't they have a right to make a decent wage, so they don't have to work, you know, 3 and 4 jobs?
But this doesn't do that, though. This makes it more difficult for them to get in the workforce to begin with. You know, there are positions that used to exist, that people used to work in, that were entry-level jobs, and now they're not around anymore because prices and wages have gone up. You know, business looks at labor like it's a good. And if the price of the good goes up by a certain amount, it's going to have to purchase more of it. And that's what forces people into unemployment.
We could dual statistics all day long. In fact, most minimum wage people are over 20 years old. They're helping to support a family. Even if they're teenagers, they're helping their family with their economic burden. But in the end, it's not about statistics. It's about the dignity of work. It's about people who get up every morning and do jobs that you and I wouldn't or couldn't do, and not being able to live in New Jersey or support a family. Minimum wage worker in New Jersey makes $15,000 a year. You can't support a family on that in New Jersey.
All right, John, Paul, thank you very much. I have to leave it there for today. If you have any ideas about topics that you would like to see discussed, please log on to our my9tv.com website. Click on Public Affairs. We'd love to hear from you. That's it for today's show. Thank you for joining us. For My9, I'm Harry Martin. We will see you next week on New Jersey Now.